Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. I interview incredible people who've dedicated their lives to helping those who've been impacted by trauma. A big thank you to our sponsors and our guests who are supporting this show. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Our folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Zalak, Raval. Zalak, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. I appreciate
All right.
it. Thanks so much.
Zalak is a senior associate practicing corporate securities law in New York. She's an author and a TEDx speaker. After experiencing a period of personal and professional upheaval, she began rebuilding her life through self-awareness, gratitude, and meditation. In 2024, she published her first book, 50 Shades of Shit, How to Unlearn and Rewire Our Unconscious, which combines philosophy, practical tools, and memoir. Her work explores how unconscious beliefs and patterns shaped by past experiences can influence relationships, decisions, and our sense of self. All right, Zalak, just a little bit about you. Before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Okay. So I'm originally from India. I grew up in a small town called Ahmedabad, and then mostly grew up in Rajasthan thereafter, which is a boarding school. And I moved to the US in 2007 for college, and I've been here ever since. And I have not yet published the book. It is a work in progress. So hoping to get it published this year or the following year.
Okay. So let's start. You start. How does all this begin for you?
Okay, so all of this begins with the journey of making, sort of reaching that point of no return where you just cannot associate with the identity that you have built. It's taken you years to build that identity, but then you reach that breaking point, the soul doesn't RSVP. It just comes in and it starts dismantling the version of that self that can no longer withstand the circumstances that you've built around or that you've co-created. And so I think this journey for me began in 2018, where, on paper, I had graduated law school, things were going really well. But in my personal life, I had realized that, I was in a situation for the last 3 years that paralleled the 3 years that I was in law school, which just, it's like you reach a point where it's like, what are we doing, and who have I become in these last 3 years? Law school as it is turns you into somebody completely different. I think for that matter, anyone pursuing a challenging career or a trajectory, that completely is on your path to change you as a person in many ways. And with that comes, a lot of resilience that you have to build to overcome things that you're not familiar with. And then when you kind of have those tools and when you're building that confidence.
All right, Zalak, hold on.
Yes.
What was going on? Get specific. You're giving me this broad structure of how to start. What was going on for you?
So, okay. I had moved from India to GW in DC, where I was there for college. And then I met somebody. I was in a girls' boarding school, remind you, So the first person that I met, I said yes to dating. And it was a long distance relationship. And then, over the course of, I don't know, through college, we would talk, we would hang out. But then, I decided to move to Atlanta to be with him, where I also was pursuing law school. And that's what I realized that, sometimes you just have to be with somebody to know what it's really like, right? Like where things can go, what is incompatible. It wasn't really, it was defined as a relationship on paper, but there was nothing about it that resembled that. Although we were friends, and so I mistook our friendship. I became a little bit more lonely in that relationship than I was outside of it. I had a lot of joy for life. I had a lot of appreciation for the people in my life. When I lived in DC, there was a Zalak that was, always full of ideas, full of excitement. What's the next best thing we can do? Or, there was a lot of, and it's that age, in your early 20s where you're just like, you can reach the sky and the moon. And I realized when I moved that a lot of that joy dissipated.
Mm.
A lot of that, sense of self sort of filtered away, so to speak, and I was with somebody. I was living in Sandy Springs, so it was a little further ways from my law school. And I started realizing that I was becoming a shell of a person. I didn't have anyone to talk to. The person that I was with was continuing to be long distance, right? Because he was rarely there, even though I had moved to Atlanta to be with him. And so I think even when he was there, there was a facade. I think we had sort of both created facades and masks to be in the situation that we thought was ideally a really good situation, culturally, in the society, or like, and then we were friends, so we thought maybe that's all there is to it. But you quickly realize that the facades fall off, when you can no longer play along. Like, I was in law school, I needed to be with somebody that understood how hard that was, not somebody that was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you have to come to XYZ events. And, we have a lot of events in our culture, right? Like, our weddings go on for like 7 days at a time. I don't know if you knew that. So I don't know, you quickly realize that, as you grow and become the person that you always, wanted to be or aspired to be, it's not necessary that the people that you've chosen to spend your life with are also on that path, right? They could be on a path where they're growing financially. For example, the person that I was with, at the time I moved with him, there was nothing, in fact, there was bankruptcy. But then within 3 years, things turned around. He was managing multiple hotels. He had grown, really, he had worked hard. He had really believed in himself, put in a lot of work, and grown financially, and, did that work, and is successful in the worldly sense, right? Um, but then there was a sense of like, and it's dynamics that play out, right? Like, a lot of cultures, it's not necessary that you always get a say or the respect that, or a sense of like camaraderie that a true partnership entails. There's, as a female, you're responsible for certain aspects, and then as a male, that person is responsible for certain aspects, and there's nothing wrong with that dynamic.
Right.
um, but
Or
it
hang on,
does.
Jalak, hang on. I just want to interrupt you because I want to hear about your specific story. Okay, you're giving me these generalities about culture. I want to hear your story. That's why you're here. So you talked about moving to meet with this guy, and you realized that you both had created this facade. How did things unravel, and what happened?
um, I think when you really want to work towards the relationship, you have emotions like anger, you have emotions like you have needs that you go after. But when you give up on something that doesn't work, it's like you can't clap with just one hand. Then there's a distance that gets created. You don't care anymore. You don't want to keep on repeating the same.
Right, but what did you do? That's what I'm trying to get at again. What happened with you? What'd you do? Did you stay in the relationship or what?
No, no, I did not. So
Okay.
I had, in 2018 is when I had a big breakthrough where I realized that for the last 3 years, I had gotten lonelier and lonelier. I had turned into somebody that, I didn't recognize. I had become a shell of a person. I didn't have the close relationships that I had established for myself when I was living in a different city. And so I made a very tough choice to dismantle that identity that like on paper seemed to be like a successful relationship, etc. And I decided to walk away from it when I was 27, when I had already sort of spent, I want to say close to a decade, in that sort of long distance situation. And then I had friends at the time who were married, who were having kids, who couldn't relate to my decision, who were afraid for me and who felt terror for me. And, there were questions like, what if you never find somebody else at 27, So,
So let me interrupt for a
yeah.
second. So you said you had moved when you decided to, as you said, dismantle this identity. Where did you move? Did you move? Did you move back somewhere or what?
Yeah, so for the first time in my life, in 2018, at 27 years old, I decided to move to an apartment by myself for the first time to live alone. I'd never up until that point lived by myself, so
Okay, where was that apartment?
it was in Atlanta. It was closer to
Okay,
Buckhead in
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Were you
Yeah, so
still in law school at that time, or had you?
no, I'd already graduated at that time. So I was
Okay.
then I had basically gotten out of the student mindset, basically gotten out of the relationship, basically gotten out of that entire dynamic, all the people that is
Wow.
associated with that relationship. Started to live alone for the first time in my life by myself. And just begun anew completely. I started work. Actually, also, I had worked previously at a marketing firm, but as an attorney, that was the first time that, in closer to the end of 2018. And so there were a lot of firsts that happened all at once for me at that point. And that was very difficult because keep in mind that, I am coming from a different country. My high school was in India, and then, in DC, I was in college. My law school friends at the time had all sort of moved out since we had all graduated. So nobody was, not a lot of people were decided to stay back in Georgia as well. So it was, yeah, it was a time of upheaval of trying to sort of step into the new.
So how do you get to the point where you decide to write this book? And obviously, the title is amazing, 50 Shades of Shit, How to Unlearn and Rewire Our Unconscious. How does that come about?
So it comes about because I realized that up until that point, I had been living a lie. Like every single relationship that I had held on to, like when I moved here in 2007, and I had really like held on to like the people that I grew up with in my boarding school. I had really like made the effort to like make sure we have calls and we stay in touch and we still try to do trips together and like put in so much effort into maintaining relationships, that over the course of years, because at the end of the day, we human beings, we feel connection is what drives us, right? But what I realized is that a lot of those connections and those relationships immediately dismantled the moment I decided to say no to the person I was with at the time. I said no to an identity, and that had a snowball effect. It was just like, this is not the version I plan to be for the rest of my life.
Just let me pause you there for a second. That is a huge decision. I mean, as a young woman coming from a culture, I'm guessing there's a huge pressure. I mean, you even talked about it. How do you, and my guess is oftentimes people don't do that in your culture. Is there truth to that?
There's a lot of truth to that. There's always a thing like, oh, US is a country where there's a lot of divorces, but it's like because people are learning things, they're moving things on, they're learning. India is a country that's
Right.
very proud of not having divorces. You stay in like 70-year-old
Yeah.
relationships and you're just really unhappy. And I don't believe in that because I knew both sides of the coin. I've seen judgment on both sides, and
Right. Right.
and I know that I'm not the kind of person that could that could be in that situation. Because I even remember bringing this point up, so for example, we're having a fight and I'm like, we need to resolve this, or like, what can I do, or what should you do? And then the person I was with at the time is like, you've seen our parents, like, you just have to get used to it, you just like putting things under the rug. And not to say that like I admire people who can, accept differences, be more accepting, be more forgiving. There's a lot to learn and process in that, right? But then there's also a limit. Like, are you in a situation where you have no joy, in your life, where you're not able to really spread your wings, where you're constantly worried, where you're constantly feeling anxiety, where you're constantly alone, because that's not the life that you're here to live. And so if that's the place you've been in for a long time and it's not
Yeah.
changing and you've made an effort to change
Yeah.
it, then you know.
So how do you get to the point? Walk me through it. Where you decide to write this book.
So I decided to write this book in, I think back in 2019, 2018, 2019, because at that point I'm still processing a lot, right? While there's an identity shift that has occurred that has said that, okay, Zalak, this is not who you are, this is not what you're, the external validation is not what you're looking for. I went into a mode of isolation. Like, I experienced so many public failures that there was an instant like sense of compassion that I had to create for myself in order to move
No.
on. Because if I hadn't created that compassion, there wasn't a way for me to move on. I would just fall back into that pattern. And but here's the best part. When you isolate yourself, from everything you've known, everything you've been, and you decide to just create self-compassion and have that moment of like, I think things are really, really bad, but it's okay, we're learning. When you decide to sort of like switch and rewire that portion, when you can show kindness to yourself, everything changes. Because at that point, you're not looking for validation. I think compassion or self compassion is an antidote to external validation. Because if you can just be understanding of your shortcomings, and if you can just accept that you're in a lot of shit that you have created, and if you can take responsibility for, you know, all the shit that you have created up until that point, then you can turn it around, right? Because you're the only one that has the blueprint of like what brings you joy, what makes you happy, what makes you smile, what ignites the passion in you. So
Did you have friends around you or anyone around you who was saying, Jalak, you're nuts. What are you doing? How are
yeah, so
you?
like my one of my closest friends, who I actually didn't let go of until maybe 2019, 2020. Her first reaction was like, um, you know, like, you're already 27 years old, and she was having, children, etc. And it's like, how are you gonna date if you're working, or you have to study for the bar? Like, how is that gonna happen? So I think they weren't able to understand the challenge that I was going through because they hadn't gone through it. They were in a very protective environment, right? You
Hmm.
go from like your parents' home to your husband's home. You don't have that opportunity to like just live on your own and sort of experience the life on your own and see if you're up for it, if you like it, if you enjoy it, or if you think it's not for you. I don't know. I think everyone's different. Some people don't necessarily need to experience that to have the compassion that I needed to experience to build that within me.
So let's get more specific about the book. What did you want to say in the book?
One of the biggest things I talk about in this book is that, you know, until you make the invisible visible, or as Carl Jung puts it, he says it really well, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So it's like we walk around, preserving relationships that, for years and decades, that don't bring us joy, that don't let us fly, that continue to keep us like staying small, that continue to sort of like cater to our fears, right? And so until we sort of take those fears, we grab onto them and say, okay, this is the control in me, right? This is the reason I'm not able to say no, even though I don't want to do this or I don't want to see this person. I'm not saying no because I'm afraid XYZ will happen. And then you just have to sit with it and be like, okay, what happens if XYZ happens? Can I deal with that? You know, do I care about all of that? Like, is it worth?
So this is easier said than done, of course, right? Just want to take a little sidestep here, do a little sidebar. When you, after you'd moved to be with that guy and you realized what the heck is going on here,
Yeah.
how long did it take you from the point when you moved to the point when you realized this is what have I done to jump ship in a sense or to
So
correct course?
yeah, thank you for asking that. I knew immediately.
You
I
know
knew
immediately.
I knew immediately, but I
Wow.
didn't do anything because I am intuitive. I grew up in an environment where there was a lot of like bullying and neglect and all of that. So I did grew up with a lot of intuition, but I didn't necessarily always trust that intuition. I didn't always trust that belief because I always had an aunt come by that said, "Oh, he just hit you on the face. That's nothing." My brother like threw this big thing at me when I was young. There's so much like gaslighting and like, oh, like you haven't experienced, blah blah blah. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is like I didn't trust it until a lot later, and then I started trusting my voice and I started trusting my intuition to guide me because it was always there, it was always present. The red flags, as we call it, right? Red flags, green flags, right? We all have both. And the thing is, it's not so much about realizing that we were not compatible as much as also realizing that I had a lot of inner work to do myself, because if I didn't do that, I would just attract the same circumstance again and again and again. That was the repeating pattern.
Did you seek out any kind of therapy as you were deciding
So,
this?
yeah, I definitely had people that I reached out to for help. I meditated, I downloaded Headspace. I reached out to I delved into the realm of spirituality and energy healing. I made sure that I was getting exercise, I was moving my body so I felt good, I had the right hormones. I joined Orange Theory, I was sleeping on time, eating on time. There's a lot of things that
Doing all the right things.
yes, I was doing. And if I hadn't done all those things, I wouldn't be here today, right? So, yeah.
So you get to the point and you want to write this book. You talked about the importance of making the invisible visible. Who did you want to speak to? Who in a sense who's the book for?
So this book is for, you can be in the situation I was in my 20s throughout your life, okay? So this book isn't just for people that are teenagers that are just entering this phase of like building relationships or in your 20s or 30s. It's for women, I would say, anywhere from like their teen years up until 60, right? You can make this change, or 70s, right? You can make this change that brings you happiness, brings you joy, helps you listen to yourself, trust your intuition. At any point in your life, you don't have to wait to be a certain age. You don't have to wait. The only thing you have to do is become aware of what you're repeating, what is coming up in your life again and again and again. Like in college, in GW, one of my best friends, as is what they would call, had a lot of what's the word? What is a good way to say this? um, when you're abandoned as a kid, and then how you
Neglect.
behave. Yeah, like how you behave when you have been abandoned as a kid. And that's a mirror. I didn't know it at the time, but she was my mirror, right? Because I thought in my head, I came from this good family, I had this great upbringing, but in reality, there was a lot of neglect. There was a lot, very low self-worth, there was very low self-esteem. There was, yeah. So I had people in my life that reflected back to me the beliefs I had about myself. My friendships and my relationships didn't change until my relationship with myself changed. So, like, I think people, like, I'm sitting here talking to you right now, but people and experiences are a direct reflection of who we are, and where we're at in our stage of, like, expansion of our consciousness, right? So that's a good example, and sorry to segue out of it, but anyone who is in our lives is always showing back to us where we're at. We can think that, oh, all of this is really good, and all is well, but in reality, if we're really good friends with somebody that has these issues deep down, it's probably a mirror reflection. Maybe we just haven't addressed them, or maybe we're just not conscious of them. So that's one way of finding out, the unconscious, like, who is around you, and what are they what are they like.
Talk about the title of the book.
It's called 50 Shades of Shit: How to Unlearn and Rewire the Unconscious.
Now, how did you settle on that? Besides it sounding like a great great title, why that title? Because it obviously has some implication. What we think of the movie, which has very strong kind of implication. Yeah.
So I think it came to me during one of my meditations. It was like a download of sorts. It made me smile. It made me laugh. And it holds to be very true for me because, up until 27 years of age, I had created 50 Shades of Shit. I had created, on so many levels, I was holding on to people, places, things that, just were completely unaligned with my joy and my peace, and that, I think, is the biggest indicator, of, if you're not peaceful, if you're not joyful, if you're not happy, and if your emotions aren't, like, delved in those, in those brackets, and if your emotions are constantly worry, anxiety, all of those other things, then you're going to keep attracting relationships and people who keep on helping you stay with those emotions. Like, I
Sure.
remember my mom growing up. So I come from a political family background, so we would have people that, like, would come in the middle of the night, and she would have to make tea for them in the middle of the night, like campaigners, during election times. And I remember her just having so much anxiety, and she always lived in it, and she didn't realize that, like, it latches on to you. You have to be the one to let go of it and prioritize peace. Otherwise, that emotion is going to keep feeding off of your energy. Like, one of the things I want to talk about in this book is attention, right? Like, whatever your attention is, you're energizing that, right? Rather, that attention is on something that is creating anxiety, rather that attention is on something that's creating joy, you're energizing that. So whatever you focus on really does expand. Going back to shit, including if your focus is on shit, you're creating more of that in your life,
So I obviously read in the bio that you're practicing law, but what you're talking about here, how are you incorporating this into the work you do? It feels like a different branch of work, life. What?
Yes, no, I would say, the one thing that both require is a lot of clarity, making sure that, the work on both fronts is very clear. What I aim to do is bring a lot of clarity, rather that is in, psychological aspects of my life or securities work. But no, this is I'm not an authority on, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a neuroscientist. My authority for this topic comes from my lived experience, and what I have done to sort of disengage from the person I used to be and the person I've become, and what I have done to create a sense of, like, a higher sense of self worth or a higher sense of self esteem, and just create more compassion and kindness and all of these things that go a long way towards even the career that I'm having today, right? Like, I wouldn't be in a position that I am today if I didn't build those within myself. Because I think even opportunities don't come to you if you don't think you don't deserve them. You know, you have to
I mean, I think
know.
your story is very powerful. Um, I think it's especially, I mean, you're a woman of a particular culture where, again, help me out here, but my guess is many women from your culture don't do what you've done. Is that correct?
Um, you know what? Things are changing now. And I'm hopeful that, people who are just extremely unhappy in their relationships for a long period of time, such as a decade or close to it, really do make a difference and do something about it. I
But
don't know the
sorry to interrupt.
specific.
It's not even just your culture. It's
Yeah.
our the Western culture as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, how is your story resonating back in India?
I
Is
I
that a
don't
loaded
know.
question? Can you answer that?
I guess we'll find out when the
We'll
book
find
is
out.
published. we'll see we'll see how it resonates with people. I hope it makes people laugh, right? Because part of this work, we're already dealing with our shadow, right? We're pointing the finger back at ourselves, and that's hard as it is, right? So part of this is a lot of like doing the inner work so you don't keep attracting the same things. And we'll see how people resonate and sort of apply, because I think if we don't make the unconscious conscious, we continue to live in that culture that we're in or that belief system that we're in, right? Because we view the world, we perceive reality through the lens that we're born with the cultures, the beliefs that
Right.
we ingrain, right? And so if my belief, I'll give you an example. So if my belief is that I am not good enough until I'm with XYZ, or, then that's what's going to get reflected again and again and again, and you'll meet people that help you hold on to that belief. It's like that red
Mm-hmm.
car theory. You spot a red car, you spot it everywhere, because our
Mm-hmm.
brain is very good at, like, the reticular activating system is really good at, like, accessing and filtering that which matches with what's already inside.
Right.
And so if there's a lot of shit inside, there's going to be a lot of shit on the outside.
Yeah.
Sorry to keep bringing back to that, but that's that's essentially what this is. We have to clear the trash that's, like, ingrained from childhood beliefs or culture or experiences that we've had. Learn to be kind to ourselves, learn to create compassion for ourselves, become you follow the blueprint that we already have, right? Because otherwise, if we are looking for approval and validation, then that's going to be the pattern that keeps repeating in your
Sure.
life. You're going to meet people
Sure.
that won't treat you right, won't respect you, because you're not doing that, right? It all starts with you. Not to sound like, it really does start within, and gets reflected out on the outside.
All right, Zalak. How do people learn more about you? What's the best way?
The best way is my email. It's zalakraval@gmail.com. Please feel free to email me. And I hopefully will have this book published towards the end of this year or early next year. So please read that. It will be available on Amazon and the bookstores. Yeah, that's.
Okay, and we'll have all that linked up here at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. All right, Zalak, appreciate you sharing your story, and I love the title of the book. Looking forward to getting it published and helping you get it out there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right, we'll be in touch. Take care.